Since the historic voyage of Columbus, the science of map making has played a leading role in the birth and development of America.
When most of Michigan was unsettled wilderness, cartographers showed their talents to aid exploration by creating maps and providing a gateway for the explorers to navigate the frontier. The immediate impact was the exchange of information between explorers and cartographers, followed by further encounters as the explorers traveled throughout the new territory. The long-term outcome included settlements and a shaping of the state. Not much is known about the very early maps, such as how, when, why, and where they came to be, according to Jeremy Harwood in his book To the Ends of the Earth, 100 Maps That Changed the World. Only a handful of prehistoric maps have survived, so there is little information to study. One of the earliest surviving maps dates back to around 6200 BCE. It is a rough representation of a village, painted on the side of a rock, found near Konya, Turkey. Over the next few thousand years, maps evolved greatly, from being mere sketches to being beautiful works of art. When the Americas were discovered, explorers were eager to travel to this new land, hoping to encounter suitable land for settling. These explorers, particularly French explorers, found what would come to be the territory of the state of Michigan. Frenchman Jacques Marquette founded the first permanent European settlement in Michigan, which is today called Sault Ste. Marie. During the course of exploration, the information that was gathered about the topography of the land they explored was sent back to the explorers' native countries, where cartographers memorialized the findings on the earliest maps of our country. For example, the explorers documented important information about lakes, hills, and forests. Cartographers relied upon explorers to travel across these new lands and improve the information on their maps. From those early maps, additional explorers could expand their travels and continue the process of exchanging information with those cartographers.
Most of the early mapping of Michigan was done by French cartographers, and these cartographers really did not travel here. What they relied upon were trappers and what they called the voyeurs who traveled around, and they wrote down things and then they added to those maps.
Some of the earliest French cartographers were so interested in having explorers come to Michigan that they made maps with fake islands on Lake Superior. Despite the fear of getting in trouble for adding the islands, cartographers kept the islands on the maps for quite a while. One cartographer, John Mitchell, had a big influence on the maps and settlements in Michigan. He drew what was considered to be a good map of the United States. However, in his detailed map, he made Lake Michigan 30 miles too short, which pleased Ohio, seeing as they were in possession of more land. When the mapmakers and explorers finally realized the mistake that had been made, map boundaries were redrawn to reflect the proper Michigan boundary, which included a straight east-west line from the southernmost tip of Lake Michigan. Michigan insisted that the territory in question was theirs by legal charter. However, Ohio was set on keeping the already settled city of Toledo and was not willing to give up the land they had claimed or their access to the Great Lakes. This conflict is known as the Toledo War. Eventually, a compromise was proposed that Ohio could have what is now known as the Toledo Strip. In exchange, Michigan received approximately 3/4 of the Upper Peninsula, an agreement which completed the final Michigan boundaries. In addition to the encounters that occurred while drawing state boundaries, the maps that were drawn created many other encounters that shaped the history of the state and the country. The explorers sent out by the cartographers often encountered Native American tribes. One of the more familiar encounters to us today was the Battle at the Creek. In 1825, government surveyors were working near a stream when they encountered two Potawatomi Indians and subdued them with a rifle. The surveying team, remembering the incident, later named that area Battle Creek. As time progressed, the natives found themselves pushed back into reservations by the white settlers. Maps also allowed explorers and settlers to find the best ways of passage to new territories. Rivers and lakes were charted that allowed merchants to determine paths to transport their goods to those settlers pushing east. The city of Grand Rapids, for example, was founded along a river with just that, Grand Rapids. This river allowed for the transportation of goods and became a stopping point for settlers. Once explorers had traveled throughout the state, they began to gather more specific information. The exchange of information to make these maps evolved over time. At the very beginning, French fur traders in Michigan exchanged their observations with cartographers back in their home country of France. The French cartographers, such as Jacques-Nicolas Belin, would then make maps based on the information that the explorers had given them. Years later, after the French and Indian War, the British took on the responsibility of exploring the land they had gained and in turn reported back to British cartographers, such as Daniel Patterson. After the Revolutionary War, the American government took over the making of maps, with paid American surveyors providing the information. J.H. Young being one of the many cartographers hired to make new maps. This is when the state maps became much more refined. The new job, that of a surveyor, was to meticulously report back their findings. In order to organize Michigan's territory, they divided Michigan into 1-mile squares, and then grouped them into townships, which measured 6 miles on every side. Doing this, they were following the Land Ordinance of 1785. These maps made it easier for settlers to know where they wanted to travel to and how they would get there. This also allowed for people to buy land and identify it specifically.
The surveyors, they made the maps, and then people would look at the maps and say, I want a farm by a river where there's oak trees. And so these government surveyors had written all this information down. The settlers would come in from out east and go to a land office and say, okay, I want to get this particular land.
Maps had a huge impact on Michigan and the United States in general. Explorers found new encounters with bodies of water, mountains, new species of animals and plants, and Indian tribes.
The exploration of uncharted territory in North America yielded an abundance of information that was provided by explorers for cartographers both in North America and often in the explorers' home countries. The continuing exchange of information led to better, more accurate maps and the drawing of many boundaries. Those maps allowed for boundaries to expand and led to encounters and exchanges of other kinds, including the growth of many types of commerce and the creation of paths of transportation over land and water. The role that these explorers and cartographers initiated carries forward today as we continue to refine and improve maps for those same purposes.